I'm Brad Leavitt with AFT Construction. You'll see something a little bit different. We have the hard hat on today. Reason being is all of our structural steel is being delivered. So especially when we have stuff overhead, we want to make sure the hard hat's on. PP&E is really important. So as we're standing here, we are delivering all of the structural steel. So when you're working through this element, there's a few phases, right? We've gone through design. We've worked with our ICF company and the structural steel, ICF specialists coordinating all the blockouts, and again, the embeds with our concrete company, so that we can start installing all these columns and beams, create the welding, and then of course that structural steel deck that's going to be from that first to second floor that's going to be poured in place concrete over the top of that metal deck. Even our staircase here will be built out of structural steel with poured in place concrete. So as we've worked through the steel, right? So you're working through all the different, steel is typically priced by the ton. There are elements depending on, the hardware you need and the size of the I-beams and, how many different pieces and cuts and so forth. But in general, it's by tonnage, right? That's how we're paying for steel. And there's a few different elements, right? We have the company that's they're actually taking the raw steel, they're cutting, to size, all the I-beams, everything's spec'd out. They're doing a lot of the welding there in the shop, and then that gets sent out to the field. And now what's happening is we have our delivery company out here that's delivering all the steel. So we're staging it around the property depending on where that's gonna be installed. So day one, which is today, it's gonna be all day that we're unloading this semi with all the steel, and then laying this around the project so that we can prep for when the crane comes into play. So phase two will be the erection, and that means when the crane company is going to come out. And when the crane company comes, we're going to be set in place, and we're going to what they call flying steel. You'll see this when you're flying trusses. I'm going to move here as they're walking over, but as they're bringing this element through, as we are flying steel, ideally around the property, the steel is where it needs to be, and now we can start putting in, of course, these columns first, get those set into place, make sure they're plumb and square, and they're going to be set in the embeds. And the reason that we leave blockouts, if you will, the concrete, is that way we have some movement. We have to make sure that those columns are set perfectly square and plumb. And so it gives us some wiggle room to get that done, and then we come back in what they call dry pack. We come back and install the concrete later and seal all that opening after the columns have been installed. So that's what those blockouts are for, so that we have the space as you've seen here on this video. As the columns are installed, now we can start laying, installing beams. And so we have blockouts, because just like you would have if you're installing floor beams and trusses, right, as those tie into maybe a basement or a first floor, you want to make sure you have bearing points, right? And that we have metal, steel in those so that we can weld to them. So again, everything's welded as in one connection. That's the advantage of steel, is that, once that's welded, that's as if you have one continuous piece throughout the build. So when those beams or columns installed, then we can come through and get the deck. And one thing that's unique, the way that we're doing this, this pour, to keep that structural integrity, our exterior walls for this first floor, we actually poured them solid concrete, except for a couple feet. They're hollow at a couple feet right now. The reason being is that now we can bring in our structural steel deck, right? And it's gonna get poured in place concrete. So now when we pour the concrete, you're gonna have this single pour right here that pours the pan deck for the floor and turns in to those first floor walls. So now you have this pour that's continuous of concrete, and you don't have this start stop at a 90 degrees. This goes continuous over the top. So now structurally, it's tying in, that floor into the exterior walls. And it creates this really strong moment there for this build and that structural integrity. Something that's gonna be really unique about this build is from sound, right? Sound and structure when you're walking. There's nothing more aggravating than when you're on a second floor and you can feel it maybe a little wobbly, feel those floor squeaks that you may hear on some of these builds. A lot of sound from that second to first level. You're not gonna have that here. There's no floor squeaks gonna happen. Again, this is real concrete. This is not a gypcrete or lightweight concrete, which we do use. It's a great product that we typically will use over framing. But when you have metal pan deck, you are not using gypcrete or lightweight concrete. You are using actual concrete. And so with that installed, we're gonna have this pour, and then now we can go to phase two, which will start the second floor exterior ICF walls up to the roof line, and then we'll come through with some more steel to hold the load of our trusses that'll come on top. So very exciting as we get the steel delivered today, scattered around the job site, in preparation to get the crane up tomorrow.